Growing up, I worry that I might be poor. I see signs that it could be true. I mean, how we, in our family, we buy clothes sort of once a year. In the fall, for school, 5 outfits, one for every day of the week. Practical and durable clothes. And then there's that crack in the plaster in our living room. It seems like a sign as well. It starts pretty small when I'm in elementary school, but it grows and grows until sometime when I'm in middle school, it sort of opens into a gaping mouth and collapses and rains down plaster dust on all of us one night. Oh, and another sign, in our township, our house is in the part where the houses are small, down near the highway, not up in the hills where some of my friends live. I'm worried I might be poor because I know somehow from a very young age that somehow to not have money is somehow bad, not acceptable. I know this when I'm just 10 or so and my mother is going through an extended illness, and I'm dropped off at the grocery store with a certain amount of money and one of those plastic clicker counters. Does anyone remember those? You used to punch the buttons to find out. Thank you, John. To punch the buttons to put your amount of money in so you'd know how much you were going to need when you got to the counter. And I'm afraid when I do this, that when I get to the checkout to tally up my would-be purchases, all those oatmeals and things we need for lunch and such, that I might not have enough money. The clerk will tell me I don't have enough money, and then I'll be ashamed. To this day, if that happens to someone in the grocery store near me, I really want to just jump in and pay the difference for them, not wanting anyone to sit too long in that fear. I worry that I am poor because I know that some people are. The woman who sits for us in the afternoons after my mother goes back to work. The family that comes to stay with us for a few weeks from the domestic violence shelter. And some kids at school who take free lunch, which is something you aren't supposed to know even about your best friends. Being poor also is what I know my father tells me time and time again he hated about his childhood. First, growing up in the rural poor along the border between California and Mexico, and then later, urban poverty when released from the internment camps which housed the Japanese Americans during World War II, his family goes to live in what he always described as the slums of Cleveland because labor was needed there. He hated that poverty, and he tells me again and again. What people think about poverty matters. And in 2012, Tavis Smiley and Cornel West, two known social commentators of African descent, launch a national poverty tour. Their goal is to put a face on poverty and to demystify the staggering statistics they are seeing. They want to help people understand that in this era after what they call the Great Recession, poverty has become epidemic, with many more new poor coming into the ranks of the poor among us. These are educated people. These are skilled people. These are people who've been living firmly in what would be considered a middle-class life, who find themselves suddenly without opportunity in a new economy that has fewer jobs, more low-wage jobs, and a lot less places to plug in. So these people, who, as Sally's call for the offering mentioned, live in neighborhoods and own things purchased in better days, which now have very little street value, are living day to day. They know that they could be out on the street almost any day. So Smiley and West decide that they are going to call attention to this in the face of poverty, the way that Ida B. Wells called attention to the plight of her fellow citizens of African descent, and especially about the way she spoke her truths about the atrocity of lynchings. So what were the shocking numbers that put these two esteemed commentators on the road? Well, they have written a book about this, and it's packed with statistics which were way more than I found that I could comprehend, even reading through it twice. I would rain these all down to you in an incomprehensible shower, but I don't think that would be the best use of our time together. So I'm going to pull out a few that are so stark I think we cannot avoid wrestling with them. The first is that there is an epidemic number of children living in poverty. 1 in 3 black children, 1 in 3 Hispanic children, and 1 in 10 who identify as white. 1 in 3, 1 in 3, 1 in 10 children living in poverty. 53% of our children live in or near poverty. More than half of our children live in families 1 paycheck, 1 illness, 1 anticipated large bill away from being unmoored. And for all our patriotic rhetoric, all the flag waving and proclamations, you are more likely to be living in poverty if you are a veteran than if you are not. And here's another one that we cannot avoid looking at. Remember that courage, remember that compassion that we asked for in our meditation. When we herald a huge increase in education spending over the course of a year, the amount of money that we are putting into that increase is less than what we are spending in one day of one of the conflicts, the military conflicts, we are engaged in now. The burgeoning that we want to be happening in our schools and in our community centers is not, in fact, happening there. That investment is not where it is. Where we are investing is in our prisons, with prison and security being one of the few growth industries in our nation and one that thrives on public dollars. And despite, and this is the last one, you can see why I picked out only a few. These are all very hard to hold. But despite all the political sneering at who is the focus of entitlements and all the rhetoric about people living on the public trough, the fact is that 85% of all the public spending in our nation goes to the elderly and to the disabled and those with special needs. 85%. Okay. So let's summon that courage, let's summon that hope, let's summon our compassion, because this is all very, very disturbing. And you might be asking yourself right about now, I can see some of you kind of shifting around, wondering about this. Why do we need to think about this on a Sunday morning? I think the answer is very, very simple. Ours is a faith that is grounded in looking hard at the truths of this world. Ida B. Wells joined us briefly as a member of one of our congregations because she wanted another place where she could speak her truths. We are invited through our faith to not look away, but instead to summon the courage and the imagination to see ourselves as part of a solution that flies in the face of things that we believe in. Because we believe in affirming the worth and dignity of life, and we also know that we are bound together in an interdependence which those statistics that I just related to you makes abundantly clear we need to address. Each one of us sitting here today has our own personal stories about poverty, about how it has crossed our life, about how we have known it, and how it is embodied for us in the lives of people we have known. And many a person walks through our doors here not to return because they're not quite sure how their story fits among the stories of the people who are seated here. Smiley and West asked this: how do we get folks to understand that there's no they, there's no them? Too many Americans are falling through gaping holes scissored out of America's safety net. Income equality is real. There is an institutionalized divide between the wealthy and the poor, so that what we have now are the rich and the rest of us. Being poor is about struggling, but it's not just about struggling. Many of us are struggling and have been since 2008 and before. As West and Smiley chronicle, being poor increasingly in our nation is about something much more serious. It is about being without hope, being devoid of imagination, that you can imagine yourself out of a situation when day after day after day after day you have looked for solutions and not found them. November is just around the corner, and we as a people who believe in democracy need to remember that mythologies about poverty and who is deserving and who matters have done decades of damage to the foundations of our democracy, and we need to be willing to come out and counter that damage. Just like the mythologies that I held as a child, we all to some extent hold mythologies about poverty. So Smiley and West have identified what they call 10 lies about poverty that America can no longer afford. And here they are. 1, poverty is a character flaw. Number 2, and as I read these, you might think about how these play, how you've heard these before in your life. Number 2, American manufacturing is going to bounce back stronger than ever. Number 3, the Great Recession has ended. It has not ended for many. Number 4, minorities receive the majority of government assistance. In actuality, almost 50% of households receive some kind of government subsidy, but 70% of food stamp recipients, for example, are in fact white-skinned. Number 5, no one goes to bed hungry in America. Actually, 50 million Americans are estimated to be chronically hungry. Number 6, America takes care of its veterans. We know that not to be true. Number 7, government handouts created the nation's deficit.